مريم تحت. ايه؟ انا بقول لك مريم تحت، المفروض تحت. نراجع هاخد بوق جاوج. نرنم مع بعض. ها قد أعيت نفسي في نفسي، اسمع صراخ يا سيدي. هو ميعادها النهارده. نبدأ مع بعض. 1 2 3. ها قد أعيت في نفسي، من ضيقي أدعوك يا ربي، وأنت وحدك أذكرك، وأنت وحدك أذكرك، لأنك شبع قلبي، لأنك شبع قلبي. اسمع صراخي يا سيدي، وإلى صلاتي أميل أذني. ارحمني وامسك بيدي، ارحمني وامسك بيدي، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك. ها قد أحاط بي نهر، ثم أحاط بي غمر، والعشب التف به رأسي، والعشب التف به رأسي، والماء عبر إلى نفسي، والماء عبر إلى نفسي. اسمع صراخي يا سيدي، وإلى صلاتي أميل أذني. ارحمني وامسك بيدي، ارحمني وامسك بيدي، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك. جاذت من فوقي الطيارات، وأغرقتني الضيقات، وكأنك رفضتني، وكأنك رفضتني، واشتهت نفسي تعزيات، واشتهت نفسي تعزيات. اسمع صراخي يا سيدي، وإلى صلاتي أميل أذني. ارحمني وامسك بيدي، ارحمني وامسك بيدي، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك. صلى يونان من جوف الحوت، أصدرت أمرا ألا يموت، من جوف الهاوية، من جوف الهاوية صرخ، وبالمراحم سمعت الصوت، وبالمراحم سمعت الصوت. اسمع صراخي يا سيدي، وإلى صلاتي أميل أذني. ارحمني وامسك بيدي، ارحمني وامسك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك. بصوت الحمد أذبح لك، وأعود أنظر هيكلك، لأنك استجبت لي، لأنك استجبت لي. كل ما فيا يشكرك، كل ما فيا يشكرك. اسمع صراخي يا سيدي، وإلى صلاتي أميل أذني. ارحمني وامسك بيدي، ارحمني وامسك بيدي، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك، فأنا في حاجة شديدة إليك. تعيشوا وترنموا.
Hi, everybody. You guys want to move up a little bit? Thank you. We're going to be talking about anger, but I'm not angry, so don't be afraid. All right. Okay. So, hello everybody, welcome. I'm so glad that you can be with us today. So today, as you see, we're going to be talking about anger. And I'm sorry, I called it anger because I couldn't think of what else to call this presentation, but we're going to be talking about anger and a lot of different parts about anger. But this is basically what our topic is. So first, I want to start by saying getting angry is normal and it's understandable, especially as a parent, right? Children know how to push our buttons, and our children especially know exactly which buttons to push that make us go over the edge and make us lose it with them. And that's okay. It's because we love our children so much. We have this extreme love for our children. And because of that, we have this, they're also able to make us have this intense feeling of anger, they just make us feel like very intense all the time, intense love and intense anger. It's both ways with our kids. And although it's upsetting and it could be surprising, I want you also to know it's normal to get angry with your child, and it's part of parenting. It's part of being a human, really, right? It's an emotion, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And everyone has their moments where they just blow up and they lose it, and that's okay. Again, it's okay. But by learning about anger and understanding it and finding healthy ways to express it, we can reduce how many times we lose it on our children, okay? So first is to understand anger and remember try to remember what you've been told in the past about anger. So you might have been told something like this. Perhaps you were told that it's inappropriate to get mad or angry, or that you shouldn't expect better treatment from those around you, that you deserve to be treated that way, that when someone's angry at you, you deserved it, you brought it onto yourself. You might feel that anger only serves to ruin relationships or damage relationships, like it's a negative thing. You might have been told that or made to feel that way. Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of someone's anger and that didn't feel good, and so you have this negative association with anger. And that's okay too, right? Because those are all normal things. And anger is a strong emotion that people sometimes try to avoid because it's so strong and it can be so intense and it can be scary, so people try to avoid it. And again, you might have these negative messages throughout your life about what anger is and how to express anger and things like that. But again, when you understand anger, when you understand that emotion itself and how to manage it, it can actually be really fruitful and serve another purpose, okay? When it's expressed properly in a correct way, in a constructive way, it can actually help a situation and help build a relationship versus all the things that we might have been told about what anger does or can do. So very simple, we're going to start off very simple. What is anger? It's a feeling, right? Just like joy, sadness, anything else. Anger is a feeling. It's not good or bad. It's not a good emotion or a bad emotion, because no emotions are good or bad, right? An emotion is an emotion, and that's all. The difference is what you do with that feeling and how you handle it. Just like anything else. What you do with your sadness, what you do with your joy. That's the only difference, but it's not good or bad. It can help you gain insight. So a lot of times people might say, I'm angry. But when you stop to think about it, there's usually something else going on there. It's not just anger, right? It could be jealousy. It could be disappointment. It could be sadness. It could be exhaustion, right? It could be hurt. It could be a lot of other things. So it's usually not standalone, and it's usually not just anger. There's usually something else underneath it. And it's a means of expression, and it's a release of emotion. So what I mean by that is you express anger, and the key here is how you express your anger makes it either constructive or destructive, okay? So hang on to that idea. And then also, it builds up and you release it, and then how you release it, again, is what makes it constructive or destructive, okay? So the analogy I'm going to use today to help us talk about anger is a tree. So like a tree, anger can grow, and it starts at the root, and then it goes up to the trunk, and then there are fruits. And at the end, you can have fruits, or you can have another anger tree. So we're going to talk about how to create fruit from your anger instead of another anger tree or just empty branches, because we don't want that. We want fruit. We work hard, we parent, and it's a lot of hard work to parent, and we want to see fruits at the end of it, right? So we're going to talk about how to do that. So again, the agenda, we're going to talk about the roots, which is going to be the causes of anger. So what causes us to get angry? And then we're going to talk about the trunk, which is how we show our anger and what that does to our children. And then we're going to talk about the fruit, so what happens when we understand our anger and manage it in an appropriate way, okay? So when we talk about the roots, again, it's the causes of your anger due to the past and due to the present. So we're going to talk about both things, the past and how that creates roots, and the present and what that means for your roots, okay? And raising children, again, gives you plenty of causes to be angry, okay? I'm not going to pretend like parenting is easy or that it's always like joyful and fun, because it's not. Sometimes it's really hard, and you do get upset, and that's okay, again. Because even under the best circumstances, like if you even don't have anger as an emotion, which is impossible, right? Even on the best circumstances, parenting is really hard. And some of your children's behaviors, again, can really push your buttons in a way that you never thought they could. So we're going to talk about those roots, and we're going to talk about them in the context of the past. So again, who you are. So starting from your childhood, who you are is based on your experiences, based on your interactions with other people, based on other people's perception of you, how you perceive yourself, right? So who you are and how you've become to be who you are. And then also the present, so your current state right now, and and in your current state when you're interacting with your child when they're doing that behavior. Okay? So let's start with the past, and we're going to do a little exercise. So let's pretend like you're walking, you have a nice little park near your house, and you're walking a trail, and you look down and you see a snake. What would your first reaction be to the snake? Scream, right? You'd be scared, you'd scream, you'd step back, oh my God, there's a snake! And you'd be afraid, right? Your heart would race, you'd feel very anxious and scared. Now imagine the next day you're going on a walk, or the next week, let's say, after you recover from your scare, you're going on a walk in the same park, and you're in that same area where you saw your snake. How would you feel in that specific area? Anxious, right? You might be looking out, you might be really careful, taking little steps, maybe going slowly, paying more attention, right? So you're going to be cautious. And then let's say you look down and you see a stick, but you think it's a snake. What's your reaction going to be? Scream, right? Because you're going to say, oh my God, it's a snake, right? So our brains are automatically going to assume the worst in a situation because it's safer that way, right? Because it's safer to think this is a snake when it's really a stick than to think, oh, it's just a stick when it's actually a snake, right? So it's safer to assume danger and to react as if danger is coming at you versus to assume safety and then not do anything, right? Because that's not safe for you. Okay? So it also changes your perception of the park a little bit, right? You're a little bit more cautious at the park. You know that there are snakes there. You know might not be a safe place, right? So whether it's a stick or the snake, it doesn't matter, right? Because it feels the same to us. Because perception is reality. Whether you think you're in danger or you are in danger, it's the same exact feeling for you and your body and your mind, and you're going to have the same exact reaction, okay? And again, we're more inclined to fight because it's safer for us to fight than to not do anything. And so this is our internal alarm system. So when we encounter danger, like see it's a snake or a stick, it doesn't matter, right? When we have that danger, the brain releases all these chemicals and says, you're in danger, you have to react. And then you go into that, oh my God, there's a threat, I have to react, which is what we call the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Have you guys heard that term, fight, flight, or freeze? Your body's reacting to that danger. And then you respond, whatever you're going to do. You're going to run away, you're going to fight the snake, you're going to freeze and let the snake eat you, whatever it's going to be, right? You're going to have that reaction, and it's all instant. It happens so quickly, you don't even realize what's happening in your body before it happens. But you have that reaction, whether you're safe or not, you're having that reaction, you're triggered, you have that reaction, and your body responds to it, okay? And the reason I'm explaining all this, I know you're like, what does this have to do with anger? But it does, I promise. So the reason I'm explaining all this is because typically when you're calm, when you're not in danger, this is how your brain processes something, right? So your brain sees something, it gets input, it interprets what's going on, it processes, it plans, and then it acts, right? That's what your brain is doing every time you encounter something, a situation. So your brain is processing, and again, it happens very fast, so it's not like you're consciously doing it, but your brain is processing because you're calm and you're thinking, and you're planning, and you're interpreting the situation and you're acting accordingly. But when your internal alarm system is triggered, you don't get to do all that stuff, right? So you see, oh, there's a snake, you interpret that's a snake, and then you just react, right? So you're not processing, you're not doing all that stuff that your brain would typically do of, is this safe or not? What kind of snake is that? Is it going to attack me or not, right? You're not doing all that stuff. You just need to react to get yourself safe, right? And the reason, again, why I'm saying that is because when we feel triggered, we're going to react. And sometimes our kids are triggering, okay? So think about your child, okay? Raise your hand. So sometimes our kids do things that upset us, and sometimes our kids do things that make us angry. And there's a difference, right? Like some things I can tolerate, like you left your shoes in the middle of the room, but that doesn't upset me, but you're doing this and this is making me angry. So raise your hand if this thing makes you angry with your child, okay? If your child ignores you, it drives me crazy when my kids ignore me. Disrespects you, talks back to you, leaves their shoes all over the place. Okay. Doesn't clean their room. Okay. Fights with their sibling, or hits their sibling, or hits you. Okay. Tells you no matter what you're asking, no. Or tells you to wait. That actually really does trigger me when my daughter tells me, wait, 1 minute. No, right now, right? Wait, tells you to wait. Or doesn't eat their food. Takes things for granted. Okay. Takes advantage of their sibling, tricks them, manipulates them, whatever it is. or lies to you? Okay. So if you identify, okay, wait, sorry, one other thing. Do you identify with one child over the other if you have more than one child? Do you feel like you relate to one child more than the other? One child reminds you of you. One child reminds you of the sibling who used to bully you. One child is the middle child and you're the middle child, so you feel for that person. Or it's the youngest and you feel for that child. Or it's the oldest and you feel for that child, right? So how your perception of your child and things that your child does affect you, and they trigger you in ways that you didn't realize they did. Because of our own childhood, right? So as you saw, if you looked around, not everyone raised their hand to everything, and not everyone raised their hand to the same things, because we all come from different backgrounds and experiences and childhoods, right? And all of those, again, made us who we are right now. And so if as a child, so I'll give you a very personal detail about myself. I'm a middle child. And as a middle child, middle children generally always feel ignored by their family. They're the child who gets lost in the shuffle. They're not the oldest. They're not the youngest. They're just the middle child. They're there, right? And so something that makes me angry now with my own kids is when they ignore me, because it makes me think, it triggers me again. It makes me think about my childhood and how I felt ignored. And so I snap and it triggers me, right? So think about your own childhood, right? Were you ignored as a child? Were you yelled at as a child? Were you told no as a child? Were you disrespected, maybe by your siblings, maybe by somebody else? Or do you value cleanliness as a person, right? Because of however you grew up. You value a clean home, and when it's not clean, it makes you very angry, right? Or did you grow up less fortunate than your kids? I feel like that's something when you grow up less fortunate than your kids and you see how much your kids take for granted, or you think about kids who don't have food and how your kids are throwing food away, that can make you angry, right? So think about your own experiences in your childhood and who you are and how you've been formed into who you are. And then think about what triggers you from your children and how that relates together, because it'll help you understand your own anger. So again, those are your roots and how that's caused kind of the anger that you feel when your kids do things now.
Can I share something?
Yes.
I notice, and I'm sure everyone here, there's always a kid that is like you and a kid that's more like your husband, right? And I've noticed that two things. The kids that are like us, sometimes they push our buttons because we see things that we used to do and we wish they weren't like, we wish that, I wish I cleaned my room and I didn't. I wish I was more organized in school. She's just like me. And I feel like that pushes our buttons. And then sometimes when things aren't so great with your spouse, if the other kid reminds you of your spouse and is doing the same thing that your spouse does, that also pushes your buttons. I see both, and I'm speaking for myself, but also others. Like I see it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about because it happens unconsciously. You don't even realize it, right? You don't even realize, but your body remembers and your brain remembers subconsciously. And so being aware of it, being, okay, let me think about my own childhood. Let me think about how I was raised and how I grew up. And let me think about my child today. That self-awareness is really key and it's really important because it makes you who you are as a person and it makes you who you are as a parent, and it affects how you respond to your child, okay? Okay, that's what I just said. So it makes you who you are as a person and as a parent. So again, this is important because when we understand ourselves, we understand our values, and we understand what our triggers are, and then hopefully we can try to predict what those triggers might be or understand why certain things our kids do make us so angry, and then hopefully prevent it or be able to manage it, right? Because again, because they're our children and because they know us, they know what's going to push our buttons, okay? I'm not saying they're trying to make us angry. They're not, right? Because they're just kids. But they know what pushes our buttons, and they do. They push our buttons, and they make that intense feeling. And sometimes that intense feeling is not because of them. It's because of a past experience. Again, our roots, right? Okay. Any questions about that before we move forward, or any additional thoughts about it? Okay. So fast forward to present, right? So that's like our roots, like way down deep in the ground. So then as you get towards the surface, right, there's more of like, how are we feeling right now in this moment, right? Like, what's going on in my life? Because sometimes we're more patient with our kids than other times. Some days I'm more patient than other days, and we have to think about why that is, right? When your needs as a person and as a parent are not being met, you run on empty. And when you run on empty, it comes out in other ways, right? So if you're stressed out about work, if you're bored, if you're tired, if you're just in a bad mood, that affects how you're going to respond to your child, right? So being aware of that, because it creates a perfect storm. When you're in a bad mood and your kid's doing something really irritating, it creates a perfect storm for anger to flare up and for you to let it loose on your kid, right? So just being aware of what you're doing in that moment and how you're feeling. Because often we're not really always aware of what we're feeling. We're just like, go, 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 because that's what life is, right? We always going, driving kids somewhere, going to work, dropping off, taking kids to gymnastics or soccer or wherever else they're going, right? We're go, go, go. We don't have a moment to stop and think, okay, where am I at? How am I feeling? And how is this affecting my interaction with my child? And also, no matter how aggravating we find our child's behavior, it's probably not the behavior that's aggravating us. I think that's another really important thing to remember, because parents are always under pressure, right? Appointments we're late to, appointments we never booked, things we never followed up on, the email we didn't respond to, our health, finances, right? The list is endless when it comes to parenting, all the pressure that we're under. And then when you enter a child who can't find their shoe, who you're late to an appointment, they can't find their shoe. I don't know where it is, Mom. I can only find my left one. Where is your other shoe? Do you not take them off next to each other, right? Like, so when you enter this child who's now doing something that's driving you crazy, or suddenly remembered, oh, I need a poster for a big project that's due tomorrow that I forgot to tell you about, right? So when all of those things happen, again, it's that perfect storm, and we snap. But if we're honest, we know if we're not running on empty, if we're in a better place, like mentally, if we're aware of how we're feeling and we're not tired, we're not grumpy, we're okay, we're going to respond to that situation differently than if we were running on empty. So making sure you're not always running on empty and you're taking time to be aware of yourself and what's going on, and changing yourself in that moment. And then the next one, so this is something I like to call spiraling, okay? Because it's very easy to spiral when you're running on empty. So for example, if you see that your kid is hitting their sibling, okay? And you think to yourself, why is he hitting her again? He's going to be a psychopath. He's going to be like, I'm going to have to like bail him out of jail one day. Like, what's going on here, right? And then from there you say, I'm spoiled him. I'm a bad parent. I've spoiled him. He's going the wrong way. I'm doing a bad job, right? And then you just cascade, you spiral. This is something that I do very often. I just spiral. It's something very small as hitting, which like isn't great, but let's face it, siblings hit each other, right? It's something that happens. And from there, you're spiraling into something that's so unnecessary. And it becomes a bigger issue than it needs to be. But if you really think about that issue, right? So like your feeling of anger is actually not anger, it's disappointment that he's hitting again, that you've told him a million times not to hit and he's hitting. You're hurt that he's hurting your other child, right? So there are a lot of other feelings going on underneath that anger. It's not anger, but when you're running on empty again and you're feeling that anger and that anxiety, it's easier to spiral and make it into something else, okay? All right, so now we've talked about the roots. Now we're going to go on to the trunks. Do you guys have any questions about the roots or the causes or anything like that? No, we're good? Okay. All right. So in this case, again, the trunk represents all the ways we express our anger, which is, again, the fight or flight response that we just talked about. That's how we release our anger. It's that fight or flight response. And again, we're more inclined to fight as humans because we want to protect ourselves, okay? So how do we show our anger? How do you guys show your anger with your kids? Yell, scream, slam doors, blame, shame, ignore. Right? Those are all ways we're showing our anger when we're upset with our kids. And they're all harmful in some way, right? So whether you're yelling or you're ignoring, whether you're slamming doors, whether you're being rough with your child or rough with their things, whatever that is, you're showing anger to your child. And again, everyone does it, okay? So I want to make sure you know that everyone does it. Everyone yells at their kid, everyone gets angry, everyone loses it. Nobody's perfect. But I want you to imagine something, okay? Imagine your partner loses your temper with you, okay? Now imagine that person is bigger than you, like maybe 2 or 3 times bigger than you, taller and bigger. Now imagine you depend on that person completely for food and shelter and protection and safety and all of those things. Like that person is your sole person who gives you food. That's your sole person who you rely on for food and shelter and clothing, all of those things, okay? And imagine that person is your primary source of love and confidence and protection and all of those things, right? So I say this, right, to remind us that like our kids are so little and it's really scary when they see that anger, even though they might not show that they're scared, right? They don't always show it, but they are. It's scary when someone bigger than you is yelling at you or screaming at you or ignoring you even, right? It's scary for them because you are that person's sole and primary source of all of these things, of food and shelter, protection, safety, love. And again, from you is how they get their confidence. That's how they get their self-perception of who I am, from how other people treat me. That's how they get it, right? So just imagine that, putting yourself in that, in your child's shoes. And again, even if your child doesn't seem to be afraid of you, it could be a lot of things. one thing could be maybe they're just so used to it that it doesn't bother them anymore. And instead they're just going to put up their defense. Like, okay, you're screaming at me, fine. Okay, are you done? Can I go to my room now? Right? That they're shutting down. They're like, whatever. I'm so used to this now, it doesn't matter. And what's scary about that is that it doesn't make them more likely to listen to you, right? It doesn't make them more likely to change their behavior. It actually makes them less likely to change their behavior. Because my mom is always yelling at me. She's always angry at me. I'm just, what's the point? What's the incentive to listen here, to behave? And the scarier part is that it makes them more likely to follow others. To say, oh, I'm going to sneak out with my friend. I'm going to go do this with my friend, or whatever it is. And we don't want that. We want to be that person for your kid who comes to you and tells you things or does things with you, right? We want to mend the relationship, not break that relationship with our children. And so that's why that's scary. And the other thing to keep in mind that I always forget is that when you're yelling at your kid, their internal alarm system is being alerted too, right? So that fight, flight, or freeze, they're also responding in that way because they feel under threat. And again, depending on your child, they're going to respond in different ways. And if you have more than one child, think about your 2 children and the last time you got mad at each one of them and how they responded. Because my 2 children are very different. Like one child will listen and negotiate and talk back and get angry and fight and scream and do all the things. One child will listen and take it in and then take some time and come back, right? So our kids respond differently, but what's happening when we're yelling at them or we're expressing our anger towards them is that their internal alarm system is also being alerted and activated, and they're also responding in that way, right? So, and then it becomes a cycle, because then you're responding because you think you're under threat, they're responding because they think they're under threat, and it just keeps on going in a cycle, right? Okay? And I want to just say, don't feel bad. Because I think when I was doing this presentation, I'll tell you another quick story. When I was doing this presentation, I put the kids to bed and I came downstairs and I'm working on my presentation and I'm like, I'm not stressed out, but I want to make sure it's I have enough information and everything. And then I hear the kids calling me, Mom. So I go upstairs. Okay, what do you need? I need to go to the bathroom. Okay, go to the bathroom. Why do I need to be here for you to be in the bathroom? Just go back to your room. Or I need a cup of water. Can you give me a back rub? So about 3 times I got called up. Okay, while I'm trying to work on this presentation. It's after 9 o'clock, way past my bedtime. I want to go to sleep. I want them to go to sleep, right? And so I started to get a little testy with them, okay? I didn't yell at them or anything, but I wasn't very nice. I just said, look, bedtime is bedtime. That's it, And I went back downstairs and I started working on this more, and then I started to feel bad. I went back upstairs. I said, I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. I'm stressed out and I should have taken out on you, right? So again, don't feel bad because it happens to everyone. It happens to the best parents. There's not a single parent who's never yelled at their kid. Maybe there is, I don't know, but not a parent that I know who hasn't yelled at their kid or lost it on their kid. So I just want to say, don't feel bad, because I started to feel bad when I was doing this, and I don't want this to make you feel bad, okay? Because that's not the point of the presentation. So now let's talk about the fruit. This is really the essence of tonight, okay? What do we do now? Now that we understand anger, we understand what our triggers are, we understand where they come from, what do we do now with all of this anger, and how do we express it, right? So feeling angry and managing your anger in a healthy way is actually really beneficial for your child, because children learn by modeling. And so when we're modeling for them healthy anger expression, it's teaching them that they can be angry and manage it in a healthy way too, right? So if you take a few deep breaths, you walk away, whatever it is, whatever you're doing to manage your anger, you're teaching your child, right? So anger, again, managed in a healthy way can be really positive for your child. And so we're going to talk about ways to manage your anger. And don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to take a bath, go for a walk. There's going to be other things that we're going to talk about that are practical, everyday things that you can do in the moment too, okay? So first is prevention. So this is pulling out weeds around your roots to make sure you get a nice, big, healthy tree, okay? It's prevention. Prevention is always going to be key in anything, and especially in this, prevention, which is preventing you from getting to the point of getting angry. So the first step in prevention is understanding anger and your triggers, which we already talked about. And the second one is setting limits before you get angry. So I'm going to throw it out there that if you're getting angry at your child because of an irritating behavior, it's either because you never set a clear expectation that behavior is not okay, or that behavior is okay sometimes, but because maybe you were running on empty or you were stressed out, it wasn't okay in that moment. For example, sometimes I'm okay if my kids are yelling and talking in the car or singing really loud. Sometimes that doesn't bother me, but when I'm tired or in a bad mood, that really bothers me, right? So it's something that is sometimes okay, but sometimes not okay. Or your child needs redirection, right? Or your child knows they're doing something wrong, you've set an expectation and they're just not listening to you, in which case you need to stop what you're doing, give them the redirection, and then try to move forward, right? So it's one of those three things probably. And so that's why setting limits, consistent limits with your kid and consistent boundaries and being consistent. I think being consistent is the hardest part because, again, we're human and our mood changes, but we have to be consistent about the behaviors that we want to set limits on, or else they're not going to know. If we're not consistent, how are they supposed to know what's okay and what's not okay, right? Because sometimes mommy's okay with it and sometimes she's not. So I don't know if it's okay or not, right? So we have to be consistent with them and make sure we set that boundary for them from the beginning. The next one is calm yourself before acting, right? So stop, drop, and roll. No, stop, drop what you're doing, like take a few minute break, and breathe. And that deep breath is not only a pause button to stop the situation, but biologically it's actually very good for you to take a deep breath. That's why people do it when they're stressed out or they're anxious or whatever it is, right? Taking a deep breath in and out biologically is healthy for you and helps your body calm down. It sends messages to your brain, right? To like those neuroreceptors. It sends all of that stuff to your brain for your body to calm down when you're taking those deep breaths. And remind yourself that it's not an emergency. Whatever is happening is, unless it is, which it might be, but usually it's not an emergency, right? So whatever that behavior was, it's not an emergency. Take a deep breath, remind yourself, it's okay. Try to find a way to laugh or smile. Actually, when I was reading, they said like when you force yourself to smile when you're upset, it tricks your brain a little bit and calms you down a little bit. So find a reason to smile, whether it's real or not, doesn't matter, just smile. Trick yourself a little bit. If you feel like you need to like make noise, you can hum. Like humming, like sometimes that motion and that act can help calm your body down a little bit. And that's it. Just calm yourself down. Like just slow down and calm yourself down instead of just instantly trying to act and react. Okay? I also read that when like some people say, oh, I'll punch a pillow to get my aggression out. But what I read was that it's not always healthy to do that because one, it kind of reinforces the anger, right? So like, I'm so angry, I'm going to hit. It kind of reinforces that anger and that aggression, and it keeps your body in that fight, flight, or freeze mode of there is danger and I need to attack, right? So it keeps your body in that kind of like tense act. So it could be a helpful release, but it's not a way to calm yourself down. Similarly, you can take like a 5-minute break. Just take a 5-minute break. So like when your kids were really little, I don't know if you ever heard about like timeouts. So timeouts are actually for adults, not for kids. When you tell your kids to take a timeout, it's for you. Like you need a break, right? I need a 5-minute break to just calm down. And tell your kids that. Be like, I need a minute to think about what just happened here because I need to like process this, right? And sometimes like people might say, well, if you leave the room or if you exit, your child might think they won the battle. But I don't think that's what it does, right? You're just, again, modeling for your child what's a healthy way to take a break. When I'm angry, I'm going to take a break and step away from the situation and just do something. Splash water on your face, wash your hands, make a cup of tea. Actually, even if you're not going to drink the tea, the process of making a tea, of like boiling water, getting a cup, getting the tea bag, putting in, pouring it, that whole process, because you need coordination, right? Your hands can't be shaky. That whole process could calm your body down. And again, you don't have to drink it. You can if it'll soothe you. But that process of doing something different for a little bit can calm your body down. If you can step away from your child, do it. If your child's too little, just go to the sink and wash your hands. That water, cold water, hot water, whatever it is again calming for the body. So do something to take 5 minutes and calm yourself down. And then you can also repeat mantras. So you could say, this is not an emergency, or my child needs love today, or we will not choose violence today. Whatever it is, right? You're going to choose something to repeat to calm yourself down. Sometimes I just say, Lord have mercy, because, like, you're like really about to lose it. And actually my daughter picked up on it recently. She's like, what are you saying? And I was like, I'm begging for mercy. I'm begging for mercy from this situation, right? So just taking a 5-minute break. The next one is listen to your anger rather than act on it. So these are all very similar in some ways, but different in others, right? So again, anger is normal and important, right? But how we act on it is what makes a difference. And we want to act and make good choices. And what we choose to do with our anger is our responsibility. It's not our kids' responsibility. We are responsible for how we express our anger. And we have to think about the underlying issue. Again, think about your roots. So think about what's happening right now. What state was I in before it happened? What are my triggers? Why is this really upsetting me, right? So think about it and pick out those weeds and try to water your tree to prevent yourself from getting escalated, right? I think this is really important. When you act when you're angry, it's rarely constructive. It's really helpful for you, for your child, When you're shouting at your kid, don't ever do that again. They're not hearing you and they're not listening to you because you're shouting. If someone's shouting at you, you're not going to be listening to what they're saying. You're going to be focusing on someone's yelling at me. That's dangerous. It's a threat. I'm going to protect myself. You're not registering exactly what they're saying. So it's rarely useful when you're acting, when you're like yelling. It's not constructive for the person when you're yelling or shouting or whatever it is when you're angry. It's really helpful. And again, try to diagnostically think about what's really going on here. Do I need new rules? Do I need to set a new routine? Do I have to work on my relationship with my kid? Why is my kid always not listening to me? I have to work on that relationship and understand what's going on there, right? All right, the next one. Wait before disciplining. If I wish I had $1 for every time I yelled at my kid, you have lost your iPad for the weekend. I wish, because 1, that's a punishment for me, not them. 2, I yell it all the time and I never follow through, right? So wait before disciplining because again, it's rarely helpful. You're just so angry. I know for me, when I say things like that, I'm so angry and I want to take away something that I know is going to hurt them, honestly. That's really what it is, right? I want to do something that I know is going to bother them so much that they're going to stop what they're doing, but that rarely ever works. If anything else, it actually makes the situation so much worse than what it was, right? So wait before disciplining, take a 10-minute break before giving that consequence, because if you take a 10-minute break and you calm down, you could actually sit with your child and have like a reasonable discussion with them, find out their side of the story, be constructive, right? And respond in a way that could be helpful for both of you to understand each other, work on your relationship, and then if you need to, create a consequence that makes sense, right? Instead of just screaming, your iPad's gone for the weekend, okay? And it's okay to tell your child, I can't believe you just did that. I need a minute to think about what I'm going to do because you just did that, right? Like, it's okay to tell your child, I don't know yet. There's going to be a punishment, but I don't know what it is. Or there's going to be a consequence, but I don't know what it is yet. I need to think about it, right? It's okay to tell your child that I need some time. Okay, the next one. Avoid physical force no matter what, okay? So do whatever you need to do to control yourself, right? Because research shows that physical force is not helpful for kids. It's actually really harmful for kids in a lot of ways. It's that trauma that could carry on in their adulthood. It could create anxiety. It can create depression, right? So avoid physical force at all costs. It's not a helpful, fruitful, effective way at all to help your child and to change that behavior. Even if it makes you feel better temporarily, again, the idea of like hitting a pillow, it's like that release of anger. It might make you feel better in that moment, but it's not going to fix whatever happened. It's not going to change that behavior, and ultimately, it's not going to make you feel good, right? So avoid that physical force no matter what as much as you can, because it could be harmful to your child. And if it does get to that, you can go back and apologize. I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. I'm sorry, right? It's always okay to go back and sorry. If you ask my kids who says sorry, it's me. I'm the one who's always going to say sorry, and I'm trying to model for them, but they never come say sorry to me. Hopefully they'll learn it one day, but it's okay to say sorry. Parents, I tell them all the time, look, parents are human, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to come say sorry, and that's normal, right? You're trying to normalize that of, I made a mistake, and I'm going to come say sorry. Okay, similarly, as one of the other ones, don't make threats because, again, you're not going to follow through on it. I'm going to leave without you, or you're never going to see that iPad again, or no TV for the rest of the month, right? Those threats, first of all, your kids know they're just threats. They know you're not going to follow through on them, right? And it's rarely ever going to be helpful. And they're only effective if you're willing to do it, and most likely you're not going to be willing to do whatever threat you screamed out at your child in anger. Again, because it's not always constructive to react before calming down. And again, sometimes also, like, if you tell them, like, I need to, like what we talked about before, I need to think about this before I give you a consequence. Sometimes that anxiety of, like, what's going to happen, what are you going to take away, could be the punishment, honestly. Like, sometimes, like, when I tell my daughter, there's going to be a consequence, but I don't know what it is, she's going to be like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know, but it's going to be bad. You're not going to like it. You know, it's like that. And Ted's like, what are you going to take away from me? Could be the punishment, honestly. Could be worse than the actual consequence. So just keeping that in mind. All right, so if after all of those things you're still angry, just let go of it, guys. Look at the bigger picture here. I think don't get attached to that anger. It's not a bad feeling, right? But most likely there's something else going on there that you can fix. So there's no need to stay in that tense moment of anger. There's no need to stay in that feeling when you can try to resolve it in other ways by figuring out what exactly is going on for you. Like maybe your son's tantrum scares you. Maybe the fact that your daughter wants to be with her friends all the time hurts you, right? So think about the underlying fact again, and don't hold on to the anger. Try to dissolve your anger and really come down to the cause of it to try to resolve it and mend the relationship and fix the situation. And also look at the bigger picture, right? Like, oh, sorry, never mind. That's the next one. Pick your battles, okay? Look at the bigger picture, guys. I feel like I pick my battles with like most things at work, at home, like with my kids, everywhere I'm picking my battles because some things just aren't worth it, right? Just like we talked about earlier, what makes you angry? Is it that your child ignores you or that they leave their shoe? It's different for all of us, but think about the big picture, right? Like, does it really matter that my child left their shoe in the middle of the floor if they're a really good person and a really good kid and they're nice to their sibling? Is that really in the big picture, in the big scheme of things, is that really going to matter? Or is that one little incident going to matter in the big picture, right? So pick your battles and pick on the things that you really value and that you want your child to value when you're thinking about raising them with morals and values and you want to raise good humans, right? So think about that big picture of raising good humans rather than picking on like the little things that make you angry that maybe aren't worth being angry over, okay? And also within that is set reasonable expectations for your child. So every child is different. You know your child. Set reasonable expectations based on their age, based on their ability, based on their development. If you want to know more about child development, all of those things are available. You can learn about, okay, 5 to 7-year-old, what should they be doing? Should they have chores? What should I expect of them? If I tell them not to do something and they do it, what does that mean? If they're lying to me, what does that mean, right? So learn about your child and their development and their abilities so that you have those reasonable expectations as well. Okay. Also, accept that you might be part of the problem. So every interaction with your child, you have the power, right? Like, yes, your child has power, but you ultimately have the power. You control your actions, and you control what comes out of it. So it takes responsibility for managing your own emotions, because then you can't expect your child to manage their emotions, right? If you're getting angry and lashing out at things, and then when your child gets angry, why are you so angry about that? It's like, well, you can't manage your own emotions, Mom. How do you expect me to manage mine, right? So take responsibility in that situation. So that the situation doesn't escalate and get worse than it needs to be. Also, I just want to throw out there that discipline doesn't always require punishment. Like, there are ways to discipline and redirect without having a punishment or a consequence. Again, it could be the idea like something's going to happen, but it might not. I don't know yet. I'm going to need to think about it. It might just be talking to your child and saying, this really bothers me, or this is not right to do, this is why, let's work on this together, right? So there's ways to redirect your child and teach them that doesn't require punishment or consequence. Because what I found, at least with my own kids, is if I'm quick to take something away as a consequence, they don't care anymore. They're like, here, take it, just take it, I don't care, right? And you don't want that to happen. You don't want them to be numb from that consequence or from punishment. So remember that you can discipline and redirect and teach without always having a punishment or a consequence. And then if we talked about this a little bit, but if you don't manage your anger well and you do yell, again, it's always okay to go back and say sorry and say, I'm sorry I lost my temper, I'm sorry I yelled. I think be careful not to say, I'm sorry I got angry, because you don't want them to think that anger is a bad emotion. It's a normal emotion, and you don't want to apologize for that, because it's okay for you to feel angry. So not saying, I'm sorry I got angry, I'm sorry I yelled at you, I'm sorry I took that away, or whatever it is that however you expressed your anger, apologizing for that rather than the emotion. And then lastly, don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, parenting is so hard. I feel like I can't say that enough. I feel like every time I talk with my friends, other moms, any situation, I'm saying parenting is so hard. And it's okay to ask for help, and sometimes you might need professional help. Sometimes just talking with your friends or whoever else isn't enough, and you need professional help, and there are resources available. One of the ones I have up there is Parents Helping Parents. They have a stress line. It's 24/7. It's confidential. If you really need something like that, if you don't feel like you have anyone else, you can always call the line. You can do counseling. There are so many professionals who are willing and have resources and tips and things like that. So always ask for help if you feel like you need it. Okay, and lastly, I just want to end with parenting is hard, you're doing great, and we're all going to get through this. It's going to be okay. We will get through this journey of parenting together, and that's it. If you have any questions? Questions? Yes?
I want to say something. So sometimes I feel like personal. I feel like I get angry at my kid. Actually, I feel angry at myself, and I get it out, my frustration out to my kid. Like, for example, if we couldn't find his
and I think that goes back to the roots of I feel disappointed in myself because I didn't do this, or I feel hurt that they did this, or I'm scared of what this will mean for them in the future. They keep on losing their pencils. There's something else going on here, right? So I think that's a good point of what's going on underneath. Yeah.
ساعات بنقطمهم لان I'm so angry فانا انت مش لاقي جزمه انت مهمل انت this affect their self confidence فثقتهم في نفسهم their self image انت مهمل انت بتنسى انت مش شاطر انت شوف الناس التانية منظمه ازاي شوف ابن خالتك بيعمل ايه شايف ابن عمتك راح في يعني it kind of escalates where it might not be needed but حتة التقطيم دي يعني you're kind of bringing them down. It leads into that.
What I really found helpful is like I'm trying to work on it like recently is like self-compassion. It's really helps. Like if I'm not angering myself, I would be calm with my kid. Like I can tell myself, okay, I'm human. I did my best today. I went to work, I cooked a meal, I did this and this, I played with my kids. It's okay to not to be organized. The perfect.
And that's such a good point, because when they say you forgiving yourself, they'll forgive themselves too for mistakes. Like some kids get so upset when they make a mistake or something's not perfect, and that can be harmful too, right? Because you want them to be able to make mistakes and be okay and learn from it. So that's such a good point, because when you forgive yourself and you show that nobody's perfect, they're okay with also not being perfect, and they're not afraid of making mistakes and trying to learn from them.
Yeah, and I found it a very good point. I'm trying to work on my kids. I'm telling them I'm angry. I'm upset with your behavior, not you. Like you're not, like it's not a problem with you. It's just that I am upset with only the behavior, not you. Like,
Yeah.
so it makes a big deal.
Yeah. That.
And I have to calm down.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is احنا عشان خايفين عليهم فعايزين يعني انا عايزاك تركز انا عايزاك تفتكر انا عايزاك تبقى منظم انا عايزاك تعرف غصب عننا it comes بتقطيم فالتقطيم ده بيأثر على ثقتهم في نفسهم انا بشوف دي مع اولادي يعني انا ساعات بنسى بزعق لهم ساعات وساعات عشان انا عايزه اعلمهم حاجه I end up doing it in a way that it's not teaching them it's actually not helping them هي بتقطمهم بتخليهم مش واثقين في نفسهم they're also afraid they're hesitant to make the decision فأنا when I saw that I immediately I'm like okay I need to take a few steps back that's what I meant by التقطيم إنه you're taking it as a teachable moment مش إن أنا هحطم من نفسيتك علشان تحس إن أنت بتعمل حاجة غلط يعني if that makes sense. Say it again.
Like if you focus on the behavior, like if I tell my kids I didn't like that.
Yeah, but this is what Tino, like this was to your point earlier about focusing on the
Yeah, and I think you're right. Separate the child from the behavior, but I would say respond to the child, not the behavior, because you know your child. You know, respond to your child. So instead of responding to like if your child is hitting, for example, it's a very simple example. Instead of responding to the hitting, respond to your child, right? So, okay, let me understand, why are you hitting? What's going on? What's your side of the story? What are other ways to solve this problem, right? So responding to the child rather than the behavior. But you're right, separate the child from the behavior. Because when you put them together and you say, they begin to identify of like, I'm bad, or I always mess up, I always make mistakes, right? And I think what's also scary about that is that then they won't come to you if they make a mistake. Like little kids have little problems, big kids have big problems. That's what Abu Mark always says. And when they're big kids and they have a big problem or they make a big mistake, they're not going to come to you because they're going to be afraid. And we don't want that. We want our kids to come to us.
What I loved about what Tina mentioned is taking 5. يعني usually in the house مثلا عندنا يعني when something happens احنا كلنا بنسكت يعني it's known that mom will take a 5 and we want them to take a 5 minute but I think walking with them through what went wrong and what should have been done you're teaching them through that you're still gonna have a consequence to the action so they learn but they learned it with you they learned what went wrong and I think taking 5 just to calm down is so helpful has been helpful like I trained myself and when I got angry because أنا بتعصب يعني I would get يعني I'm a human صح؟ بس I trained myself to take 5 minutes and I do like أشرب كوباية مية أعمل كوباية يعني I distract myself بس it's also good for me كده to put together my thoughts then I bring and I have that conversation one-on-one with my child. The other thing is, and I loved what you said about discipline doesn't mean we have to have هي مش خناق يعني discipline doesn't mean أنا لازم أتعصب ويبقى صوتي عالي وأتخانق that's not discipline. It's more of helping them understand and we lead by example صح؟ So if إحنا عصبيين وصوتنا عالي وبنزعق they just gonna do the same. So I think leading by example in the moment, understanding إن إحنا we're human. However, I'm teaching, not only I'm teaching them what went wrong, but I'm teaching them how to respond when something wrong happens. But discipline doesn't mean أن أنا أزعق وأشخط والتربية يبقى لازم فيها زعيق وشخط. It's not always that, if that makes sense.
No, thank you. Any other comments or questions or anything? Okay. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to put it right.
We'll do the raffle first? Okay. 3?
Okay. 4902. 4902. 4902. What? I have a ticket. Okay, next one. No? All right. 4918. 4918. Okay.
Okay, 2 more.
4905. Four nine zero five. All right. 4917. 4917. Oh, that's it. Okay, cool.
Now it's
النيو كامر الاول بعد العيد اوكي عشان نشوفنا دول مارتينا متى
Martina Mata.
Martina Meta.
No, I can say Martina.
Martina.
There are gifts for
احنا
newcomers.
عايزين نقول ويلكم للناس اللي جت جديد النهارده. مارتينا متى جوزها توماس. مش عارفه ليه كنت فاكراك اسمك ابانوب ما اعرفش ليه.
ممكن.
مش عارفه انك اسمك ابانوب بس توماس لا كده اوكي. مارتينا توماس سامية باسيل سوري سارة باسيل.
Yeah, come get a present.
I think it's دول.
يس وجورج سويحة. دول اسمهم.
Mary has one. Here we go. Can we say thank you? Wait.
واحدة لداني واحدة لماما. سارة باسيل ومينا جابس.
Okay, and then there's the happy birthday. What Eid minute?
يس. ده عيد الميلاد.
ده بتاع عيد ميلاد.
اه يا ده جورج سويحة. جورج جوز نيرة مشوا. فين جورج؟ جورج سويحة. ده بتاع أول مرة يجي. جورج
بجد؟
يا جوز نيرة.
Nair, I'll give it to Nair.
نيرة فين جورج؟ ده هرب مننا؟ وصلوا نيرة عشان قربت تجيب ريباكا. هتجيب لنا ريباكا قريب. هتسميها ريباكا على اسم عياد ميلاد الشهر ده كاترين جدلة. كاترين يس حبيبة قلبي. كاترين جدلة يس. انت اسمك كاترين شنو ده دلوقتي صح؟ مدحت عبد المسيح. مدحت عبد المسيح ده اللي انا كنت فاكراه خلاص مش موجود. يس أميرة مدحت في واحد تاني اسمه أميرة قديس. يس اتفضل أميرة. هابي بيرثداي. تالين جورج. تالين يس خليك مرقص أبو شوشة. يس
الثانويه 39.
عايزه ولا ده؟ لا ما اختاروا على نفسكم حطها في المطبخ بقى. يلا.
ما اعرفش عايز ايه.
يلا نصلي. مرقص ولا هنصلي؟ مرقص. او خلي اي حاجه. او توماس. خلي توماس. اوكي. توماس. Can you pray for us? You don't want to? I know.
Okay, we're just going to pray? Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for bringing us together, for allowing us to have another start to our week all together in fellowship. Please, O Lord, help us to listen with our hearts and an open mind, and to keep you at the forefront of everything, including our most important job as parents. Help us to always remember that we can't do any of this without you. Through the intercessions of St. Mary, the Theotokos, and our Holy Mother, hear us when we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Thank you. Here, you want to say something? What do you want to say? Okay.
Pray for us? Can you pray for us?
I think I was like,
طب قولي أي حاجة. Song? Anything? كسفت خلاص. حتى إحنا لو شهرين تاني ما لناش اسم يا جماعة. حتى إحنا لو شهرين إحنا ناسيين. حتى إحنا لو شهرين.
Yeah. Like, are you ready to hear it?